His brother slept with his fiancée. His family took his side. So he cut them all off, and built a life so good they can only watch from a distance they'll never cross. My name is Ethan. I am telling you this because this story has enough people in it who hid behind vague language and convenient silence, and I refuse to be one of them. I am Ethan. I was 31 years old. I had been with Vanessa for 4 years and engaged for 14 months. I had a 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood I had watched improve every year I lived there. I had a career in logistics management I had built from warehouse floor to regional coordinator. I had a retirement account, a savings account, and a reputation in my family as the one who had it together. The responsible one. The one who sent money home when things were tight, who showed up first and left last at every family event, who fixed things when they broke and paid for things when the budget ran short and never once kept a running tab because that was not the kind of man I was raised to be. My brother Darnell was 34. 3 years older, which I mention only because it matters when you consider what he chose to do and then what my family chose to do after. He had always been the charming one. The one who moved through rooms like he owned them. The one my mother made excuses for on a rotating schedule, a new excuse every season, because she loved him in that particular way some mothers love the child who needs the most from them. Darnell had been between jobs, between women, and between apartments for most of his adult life, and someone in our family had always caught him. Usually that someone was me. I had let Darnell stay in my house for 6 weeks the previous winter while he sorted out a housing situation he described as temporary and complicated. I did not ask too many questions. I gave him a key. I stocked the fridge and told him to stay as long as he needed. I went to work every day and came home to a brother who was eating my food and watching my television and apparently also spending significant time with my fiancée while I was gone. I did not know that last part in the winter. I found out on a Saturday night in April when I came home early from a work trip that got cancelled, walked upstairs, and the bedroom door was open just enough. I stood in the doorway. I watched them see me. I watched Vanessa's face go through 5 different expressions in about 2 seconds, landing on something that looked less like guilt and more like calculation. I watched Darnell sit up slowly, and then, and I need you to understand how much this moment defined everything that came after, he looked at me and said the words that told me exactly who he was underneath all the charm. He said, "Bro, it's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like." I turned around. I walked downstairs. I sat in my kitchen and sent 2 text messages. One to my best friend Troy telling him I needed him to come over. One to my mother telling her she needed to know that Darnell had just slept with Vanessa and I was handling it. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and waited for the sound of them getting dressed and the inevitable conversation I already knew I did not want to have. Vanessa came downstairs first. She sat across from me at my kitchen table in my house and told me it had only happened twice. She said it like twice was supposed to be better than 100 times. She said she had been feeling disconnected from me, that I worked too much, that Darnell had been there and he listened and it just happened. She said it just happened the way people say it when they have rehearsed for an audience they expected to be more forgiving than the one they got. I let her finish. Then I asked her to leave my house, take whatever she could carry that night, and arrange to get the rest within the week. She asked if we could talk about it. I told her we were done talking. She left. Darnell came down 20 minutes later. He sat where she had sat. He had the expression he always wore when he had done something indefensible and needed to charm his way out of it. He said he was sorry. He said it got out of hand. He said Vanessa had pursued him, that he had resisted for weeks, that I needed to know it was complicated. I looked at my brother, my blood, the man I had fed and housed and defended and bailed out and never once made feel like a burden, and I said one sentence. I said, "We are done." Then I stood up and pointed at my front door. He tried to talk. I pointed at the door again. He left. I called my mother at 9 the next morning. Not to cry. Not to vent. To inform. I told her what happened factually, completely, and without editorializing. I told her I had ended things with Vanessa and was cutting contact with Darnell and that I needed her to understand what her son had done in my house. She listened. She was quiet for a long time. And then she said something that rearranged everything I thought I knew about where I stood in my own family. She said, "Ethan, Darnell has always had a problem with impulse control. You know that. You need to find it in your heart to forgive him. He's your brother." I asked her what she was saying. She said families work things out. She said Darnell felt terrible. She said Vanessa was also wrong but that I needed to be the bigger person because that was who I was. She said I had always been the strong one and that was why she knew I could get through this. She said I needed to think about what tearing the family apart would do to everyone. She did not say she was sorry for what he did to me. Not once in that entire conversation. She said she was sorry things happened this way. That is a different sentence. I noticed the difference immediately and I have never forgotten it. I called my aunt, my father's sister, the woman who had been at every birthday and graduation and who I had always believed saw me clearly. She said she heard what happened and that it was terrible but that Darnell was struggling and family needed to stick together in hard times. I called my cousin who had been in my wedding party lineup. He said he did not want to get in the middle of it. By the end of that week I had spoken to 11 members of my family. 3 of them said what happened to me was wrong without qualification. 8 of them found a way to soften Darnell's responsibility, redirect attention to Vanessa's role, or ask me to consider the impact of my anger on family unity. One of them, my uncle, told me I should have known better than to let another man stay in my house with my woman. He said it like I had left valuables unattended and should have expected a theft. I want you to understand what I was hearing underneath every one of those conversations. I was hearing that Darnell's comfort inside the family was more valuable than my wound. I was hearing that my role as the stable one, the provider, the one who holds things together, was so load-bearing that even when I was the one who had been destroyed, I was still expected to carry weight. I was hearing that I had spent 31 years being the foundation of a structure that would never, not once, hold me up in return. I had been the emergency contact for every person in that family. I had been the one they called when things fell apart. I had been the one who quietly subsidized holidays and covered shortfalls and never made anyone feel small for needing help. I had believed, without ever examining it too carefully, that this was a relationship. That what I was putting in was building something mutual. That when the day came that I needed to be held up, the structure I had spent 3 decades maintaining would hold me the way I had held everyone else. That week taught me the structure was never mutual. It was mine. I had built it. I had paid for it. And when I needed it most, every person inside it either handed me a shovel or walked away. That was the last week I spent trying to be heard by people who had already decided what they could afford to acknowledge. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I stopped showing up. I canceled the automatic transfer I had set up to help my mother with her utilities. I withdrew from the family group chat without a word. I did not send a message. I did not write a letter. I did not give a speech. I just stopped. And I want you to understand that the silence was not petty. It was not a tantrum. It was the most honest thing I had ever done. Because continuing to show up would have been a lie, and I was finished lying to myself about what I meant to the people who were supposed to matter most. I cried exactly once. 3 weeks after everything. Troy came over and we sat on my back porch and I had 2 drinks and then I cried for about 20 minutes. He did not say anything. He just sat there. When I was done I wiped my face, finished my drink, and we talked about basketball for an hour. I have not cried about it since. I am not proud of that. I am also not ashamed of it. It is just what happened. The family did not reach out that first month. I think they expected me to cycle through the anger and come back around, the way I had always come back around, because that was what I did. That was my established pattern. Ethan gets upset, Ethan processes it quietly, Ethan shows up again because he is the responsible one and the responsible one does not let things fall apart. They were waiting for the pattern to run its course. They did not know I had spent 3 weeks understanding that the pattern had been the problem all along. Then I got to work. The first thing I did was sell the house. Not because I could not afford to stay. Because every room in it held a version of something I no longer wanted to look at. The bedroom. The kitchen table. The front door. I sold it within 40 days, made a solid profit on the appreciation, and moved into an apartment across the city that no one in my family knew the address of. I got a new phone number. I updated my banking to a new email address that was not connected to anything they had ever seen. I did not disappear dramatically. I just quietly moved everything that was mine to a location that was mine alone, and I did it so cleanly that by the time anyone thought to look, there was nothing left to find. I went to therapy. I want to say that plainly and without embarrassment because I think men are told, in 1,000 different ways, to just rebuild in silence and call it strength. I sat in a chair across from a therapist named Dr. Ellison for the better part of a year and I worked through what had happened. Not just the Darnell and Vanessa part. The whole architecture of my family role. The way I had been the responsible one so completely and for so long that I had accidentally trained the people around me to take my stability for granted. To assume I would absorb. To believe that my capacity for composure meant I did not need to be protected. Therapy did not make me soft. It made me precise. It helped me understand exactly what I was done with and exactly what I wanted to build instead, and the difference between those two things turned out to be the most important knowledge I had ever acquired. Troy was in my corner the whole time. He had a network in a different city, a mid-sized company going through a growth phase, and he mentioned my name to the right people at the right moment. I went through 3 rounds of interviews over 2 months and was offered a director-level position 2 full rungs above where I had been. I negotiated. They countered. I countered again. I had spent my entire career accepting the first reasonable offer because I was grateful, because gratitude had been my default setting for as long as I could remember, because I had been conditioned to believe that needing things made you a burden and the safest way to avoid being a burden was to want less. I was done with that. I was done being grateful for less than I was worth. They met my number. I started in September. I moved cities. New apartment, nicer than anything I had lived in before, just mine. A gym I went to every morning at 6. A routine that belonged entirely to me, structured around my preferences and no one else's. I worked hard in the new role and the results showed within the first year. By year 2 I had expanded responsibility and a team under me. By year 3 I had a compensation package that would have made my 31-year-old self lose his breath. I invested. I learned how money worked when you stopped spending it on people out of obligation. I stopped subsidizing other people's lives and started compounding my own. I met Renata at a conference in my 3rd year away. She was a supply chain consultant, sharp and direct and completely uninterested in performing warmth she did not feel. She asked better questions than anyone I had encountered in years. Not questions designed to impress, questions designed to actually understand. We talked for 3 hours at a networking dinner and I drove home thinking about how long it had been since a conversation had made me feel like a person being known rather than a resource being assessed. We dated slowly, which was intentional on both sides. On our 5th date I told her the whole story. I told her about the doorway and the kitchen table and the 11 phone calls and what each one had taught me about what I was worth to the people who were supposed to love me first. She listened without interrupting. She did not flinch. She did not offer immediate reassurance or rush to fill the silence after I finished. She sat with it the way someone sits with something important. And then she asked me the only question I had not been asked by anyone else in all the months that had passed. She said, "What do you need from someone who loves you that you didn't get from them?" I answered that question. Completely. Specifically. Without softening any item on the list. And she met every single item on that list in the years that followed, consistently and without being reminded, the way people meet commitments when they made them honestly and meant them fully. We got engaged last spring. The ring was chosen with intention, bought without asking anyone's permission, and presented on a Tuesday night in our apartment with no audience. I do not need witnesses for the things that matter most to me anymore. I spent too many years performing stability for an audience that was not paying attention to what it cost me. The proposal was for us, not for anyone watching. Now let me tell you about the family, because they did not disappear and I want to be honest about how that part went. They found me eventually. Not all at once. In pieces, the way water finds cracks. My mother reached out through Troy first, a few months after I left. Troy told her he would pass the message along. I did not respond. She sent a letter to my parents' address that Troy forwarded to me 6 months after that. I read it. She said she missed me and that she hoped I knew she loved me. She said she hoped I could find peace. She did not say Darnell was wrong. She did not say the family had failed me. She did not say, "I chose poorly that week and I have spent every day since understanding what I cost you by doing it." She said she missed me and she hoped I could find peace, which is a sentence that puts the burden of resolution back on the person who was already carrying everything. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer and that is where it remains. Darnell sent a text to my old number that bounced back undelivered. He found my work email eventually through a mutual acquaintance and sent a message saying he had changed and that he thought about what he did all the time and that he hoped I was well. I did not reply. Not because I was waiting for a better moment or a more complete apology. Because there was no reply I could send that would give him what he was looking for, and what he was looking for was for me to make it okay. To absorb it one more time. To let the pattern run its course. That is not something I am willing to do. Not now. Not ever. Vanessa reached out once, about 2 years after everything, through Instagram. A direct message saying she had done a lot of work on herself and wanted me to know she was sorry for the pain she caused. I accepted the apology internally, which is what Dr. Ellison had taught me, because carrying active contempt is expensive and I had stopped paying for things that did not benefit me. I did not respond to the message. The apology was hers to send. The receiving of it was my private business and I kept it that way. The harder ones were the cousins, the ones who had been neutral during the crisis and then genuinely confused when I stayed gone. One of them reached out about a year ago and told me the family talked about me all the time. That my mother had a photo of me on her mantle. That everyone at the last reunion asked where I was. That Darnell had apparently been telling people he regretted everything and wished he could take it back. The cousin asked, with what seemed like genuine confusion, why I was still keeping my distance when it had been so long. I wrote her a response that I revised 4 times. I told her that time passing is not the same as things being resolved. I told her that the 11 conversations I had that week showed me exactly what my pain was worth to the people who were supposed to love me first, and the number I arrived at was not enough to justify continued investment. I told her I had built a good life and intended to protect it. I told her I wished everyone well and meant every word of it. Then I closed the conversation. She did not respond. I did not expect her to. People who ask why you are still gone rarely want the actual answer. They want the answer that lets them feel better about the fact that you left. Here is what I have learned about building a good life after people show you who they are. It does not feel like revenge in the moment. It does not feel triumphant or satisfying in any cinematic way. It feels like getting out of bed on a Tuesday when nothing is forcing you to. It feels like going to the gym when you are tired. It feels like sitting in a therapist's office and dismantling the stories you told yourself about who you were supposed to be for other people. It feels like negotiating the salary instead of taking the first offer. It feels like choosing a woman who asks you real questions and then actually listening when you answer. It feels like signing a lease on an apartment with no one else's name on it and standing in the empty living room on the first day and understanding, for the first time as an adult, that the space around you is entirely yours. The success does not taste like winning. It tastes like breathing. But I will tell you what does feel like something close to justice. My mother called Troy about 8 months ago. She told him Darnell had gone through a difficult stretch. That he had burned through relationships and opportunities and that the charm had stopped opening the doors it used to open. She said Darnell talked about me like a wound that would not close. She said the family had moments at gatherings where someone mentioned something I had done years ago and everyone went quiet. She said my absence had a shape in the room. That they could feel the exact dimensions of what was no longer there. Troy told me all of this over a phone call and then asked, very simply, "You good?" I told him I was good. Because I was. Not because of what she had said about Darnell struggling. I had not spent 5 years building something good so that I could enjoy hearing he was struggling. I do not want Darnell to suffer. I genuinely do not. But I also do not carry any responsibility for the consequences of choices he made freely and completely with full knowledge of what he was doing. His life is the result of his decisions the same way mine is the result of mine, and mine has been good, genuinely good, built from the ground up with clear eyes and honest effort and the radical act of finally deciding I was worth building something for. I had spent 31 years being the foundation. I decided to be the house. Renata and I are getting married in October. Small ceremony. People we have actually chosen, each one of them present in our lives for reasons that have nothing to do with obligation or history or the kind of guilt-maintained relationships that fill most family gatherings. Troy is my best man. Dr. Ellison, who I still see quarterly because maintenance is not weakness, knows the date. The apartment we are in now is a temporary step before the house we have been looking at in a neighborhood that will be better every year we live there, bought with money that is ours, decided by us, with a deed that will carry our names and no one else's. My family will not be at the wedding. Not because I wrote a declaration about it. Not because I made it a statement. But because an invitation requires a relationship, and a relationship requires a foundation, and the foundation was revealed to me clearly on a Saturday night in April and confirmed thoroughly across 11 conversations in the week that followed. I know what that foundation is made of. I know its load-bearing capacity. I know what it holds and what it drops. I am not building my marriage on top of it. I wish them no harm. I mean that without performance. I hope Darnell finds a way to build something real. I hope my mother is well and loved and surrounded by people who make her happy. I hope the family gathers and laughs and puts photographs on mantles. I hope every one of them is okay. And the distance between where I am and where they are is not something I maintain out of anger anymore. Anger burned itself out a long time ago, somewhere in the second year, and what replaced it was something quieter and more permanent. It is self-knowledge. I know what that circle cost me. I know what it gave back. I ran the numbers clearly and without sentiment, and the return on investment was not there. I closed that account. I opened better ones. The interest compounds every year. If you are somewhere tonight carrying a wound your own family handed you and then asked you to carry quietly for everyone else's peace, I need you to hear this one thing clearly. The peace they are asking you to keep is not for your benefit. It is for theirs. It is so they do not have to sit with the full weight of what they allowed. Do not carry that. Put it down. Build something so solid and so entirely yours that the only view they ever get of it is from a distance they created themselves and will never be invited to cross. They showed me what I was worth to them. I spent 5 years showing myself what I was worth to me. Those are two very different numbers. And I will never again let someone else's math determine my value.